How's it going, guys? It is the Real Estate Investing Avengers, and we're here to talk about something that Canada's done recently, okay? They just banned foreign investors from investing in residential real estate. Now, they're doing this in an attempt to help keep home prices lower for the citizens of the country. Is it actually going to work? Are there any pros? Are there any cons? And should the U.S. follow suit? So we're going to go to Matt first, who wants to tell me where I'm wrong on this topic, because apparently it's older news than I thought.
They've been doing it across Canada, but yeah, now it's becoming more trendy. I think they started in Vancouver a few years ago, but yeah, then they've started to work it across the country. But yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, the challenge that you have in Canada is that if you are a citizen and you're buying and using a Canadian bank to buy a Canadian asset, there are only 3 or 4 big banks there. And everything that they do is floating rate. And so the nice thing about that is that when prices or when the rates were what they were for the last 2 years, their housing skyrocketed. Like pretty much any unit that you wanted to buy in like a city like Toronto was over $1 million, but it's because people were buying the payment. The challenge is that when you start to see inflation and the run up that they're going to see, the challenge that you're going to have is your payment in 5 years, you might be in a little bit of trouble. Because the rates literally could be double. But I think from a foreign investor perspective, I think the challenge always remains, which is, largely when you say foreign investor, you're usually talking about China. And usually when you're talking about China, they're also talking about buying in cash. The other reason that they're buying in cash is because China is a famous currency manipulator, meaning that they prop up their currency against all other currencies in the world. So their dollar, their yuan, goes that much further. Mm-hmm. So if I know that a country is engaged in propping up their dollar, that they are engaged in essentially a currency warfare, and that my citizens, as they are today, are already having trouble buying, I probably look at stopping them from being able to buy. And at this point, I'll transition it to Dion for him to tell me why I'm wrong.
Always my favorite thing. Neither one of you are wrong. This is something that they're trying to do.
Sure.
Like rent control in the United States.
Yes.
The intent is to help the average person, the renter. Mm-hmm. In Canada, the goal is to help the average home buyer. Mm-hmm. It isn't new news. This is actually part of the Mandela effect, and it is a part of Google cleaning up the internet. This is the third time that we've instituted a 2-year ban in Canada. Mm-hmm. But every time you Google it, it will almost only list the current one.
Right.
Trudeau actually ran on it in his platform of, when I'm elected, my plan is to do a 2-year ban on foreign investors. Been there a while now. Predating that, in 2016, Canada instituted something like our FIRPTA tax here in the United States. 15% tax penalty to foreign investors on the sale of a property, which doesn't sound like a lot. When we look at our taxes, we as investors in real estate, we think, okay, I'm going to buy a property, I'm going to hold it for a while, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to have these gains. I could 1031 the gains, so the taxes don't really matter. I could pay the taxes on the gains and survive. But here's the problem with the FIRPTA tax and why it really it tries to stop the supply, because we have this in the United States too. It's 15% on the sale of a property. The gross value of the sale of the property, not the profit.
Right.
They can actually sell a property, make 10%, but have to pay 15% in taxes and write a check to pay their taxes more than what the sale of the property is getting them. Mm-hmm. I actually found this out because in 2018, I purchased a duplex from a foreign investor, and the title company jacked it up, and the IRS came after me for $44,000. And then the title company had to fix that, which Chicago Title in Olympia, yes, they can make a mistake, but they fixed it. Absolutely happy with them. We'll use them again.
That's all we ask.
Right. It's all we want. If you make a mistake, own it, fix it.
Just fix it. Mm-hmm.
So not to name them, but at least they fixed their problem. So the problem that we're doing is they're trying to impact the demand side. The issue with housing in the United States, I can say this because I live here and I know this, we have a supply problem, not a demand problem. The demand isn't going anywhere. We keep raising rates. We take away people's buying power, and it shifts to people who are buying all cash, foreign investors, or 1031 gains from a different property into this. So the purchases are still happening, less of them, but the prices are still there. Some markets are down, some markets are up. In Canada, now I don't live there. So, whenever you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and umption, right? So I don't want to do that. But I'm assuming they have the same kind of regulations we do in the United States, where it's multiple months to get permits. You spend $35,000 before your shovel touches the dirt to try to get a build done. Yeah. And it's the regulations on and limiting factors of building that is impacting the supply and demand more than anything we can do to the demand side.
I agree that really what it comes down to is their effort to affect prices by affecting demand. And I don't think that you can do that via demand, because you can't collectively just tell people, oh, no, you don't actually want this anymore. You can force people to be able to not afford something, which is kind of what's happening right now when we saw interest rates go up over 6%. And all of a sudden transactions fell off a cliff. It wasn't because the demand for housing went away. It was because they physically couldn't qualify for the lending to actually be able to buy that housing. And so the demand for housing technically went away. And so, we talked about this when we talked about rent control, the carrot versus the stick. Something that's very frustrating is builders do not build starter houses anymore. All of my houses in Gary, Indiana are what I would call a starter house. 1,000 square foot, 1,100 square foot, 2 or 3 bedrooms, small bedrooms, 1 bath. All of the new build homes that they're building right now in Pierce County, and I've toured many of these communities, they're 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 2.5 bath, huge double car garage, 3-car garage, long driveway. These are not starter homes. And so people struggle to be able to get something that's affordable. Now, here's a couple of different numbers just for you guys to chew on for a second, and we'll get some more thoughts. So the average price of a house in Canada in US dollars is $568,000. In the Canadian dollar, it's like $776,000. But no one cares about the Canadian dollar because it's weak, and it's not us. It is about cost of their house is 11 times the median income. Now, here in the US, historically, the average cost of a house has been about 5 times the median income. Currently, right now, the cost of a house here is about 7.7 times the median income. That's also what it was during the crash back in 07, 08, which is what's causing some people to say, this is proof it's another crash. Well, that's an argument for another video. But my concern is, if they're at 11 times the median income, clearly there's some strong housing inaffordability in that market. We talked about some of the things they shouldn't do. We sort of covered what they could do. So I want to go back to Matt, get his thoughts. Matt, what could they do? What should they do in order to create housing affordability in Canada?
Oh, boy. I mean, the biggest thing is the supply. They have to find a way to create supply. I mean, for me, being on the supply side, on the supply side of economics, I would create a bunch of incentives for builders to build affordable housing. I would reduce the amount of fees and costs associated. I know here in the States, like we talked about, it's $35,000 before I put a shovel in the ground to even build a single family house. That's unreasonable. It's untenable. And even worse is if it's a 4-unit property, it's 15, but then it's 9 times 4. It's 51 grand plus approvals, plus plans. It's $70,000 to build a 4-unit. And I haven't moved a grain of sand yet. So I think the only way that you can do it is on the supply side, which is you incent builders to build the type of assets that you're looking for. Number one. Number two is you have to find a way to reduce the cost for them to do that. And largely it is, if you look at in the States, the median home price, like you were saying, about $500,000. If the median price is $500,000 and you're looking at about $50,000 in fees and all the other stuff that you have to do, that's 10% of the house. And most builders only make 15, maybe 20%. So if you eliminate those fees and then just the cities look at it and say, you know what, we're playing the long game here. Because when a big developer comes in and says, I'm going to build 400 units, but I want 10 years tax-free or 10 years tax deferred or 10 years tax reduced, and let's have an escalator over the 10 years. The developer often will then say, you know what, we're going to either sell them off now or we're going to hold for 5 or 7 years. And then with 3 years still left on that, now we're going to sell the asset because our numbers look like what our numbers look like. And the best profitability years are gone. So it's always about dealing with things on the supply side and making sure that you're creating more supply at a lower cost. That's my thing.
Dion, any other thoughts on what could be done to fix the inaffordability issue in Canada?
I am going to break the internet. And I'm going to say I 100% agree with Matt. There's actually nothing to add on that. It streamlined the building process and incentivize it to increase the supply side. So that is the solution that I would see in Canada. My closing thoughts are, and I actually want to drag a dead horse in here and beat it, because this is me beating a dead horse. The affordability index is broken. It is not a usable metric. In 2008, when the majority of people worked from home, where you lived and earned your money, and affected the affordability index, because what you made versus what you can spend dictated whether it was affordable or not. Zuber and I did a video recently on the 10 places people are moving to the most, and it wasn't out of California and out of New York. Like they were on the list, Florida, and Texas. There were two of the things, but San Diego, Tacoma, the places right outside of the bigger cities like Seattle, Los Angeles, where people can go into work once or twice a week, but can commute a longer distance, meaning that those remote workers that are now at a larger percentage of our population than at any point in history because of what happened in the last couple of years, means the affordability index is absolutely useless. But I've actually gone through the people that I know, the real life people that I know. About half of them have remote jobs. And most of the people I know, because of the job I've had, are truck drivers. So it's the ones who aren't driving a truck that aren't going into an office every day and can live anywhere they want within 3 or 4 hours of their company and still commute in once or twice a week. So when we hear things like it's unaffordable, people are going off of a metric where even if we use the tax data, that's a lagging indicator. We're not going to know until 2024 where people were living in 2022 with any kind of reasonable accuracy, because the tax records that come in 2023 say where they were living in 2022. Then we get that data by 2024. So right now we're using where people lived and worked in 2020 and 2021 to say, based on what they were making and maybe a little 5 or 7% cost of living increase, it's unaffordable by a metric of 7 or whatever the number was. When in reality, it could have gone down 50%, because the people that were in Seattle that were making $400,000 a year are buying places here in Tacoma where people were making $80,000 a year. So it's not even a fair comparison. So I am not large enough. I don't think that we have a large enough audience to impact. But every time we hear somebody say affordability is off the charts, that person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Agreed.
Well, I can understand when people are frustrated, because a lot of people want to buy a house. And when a lot of people look, they say to themselves, it's too expensive. And here's an interesting conversation I had with somebody recently who I helped get a duplex, get started house hacking. They didn't believe they could qualify for enough money to purchase a house. They were operating under the pretense that they couldn't buy a house. And when we talked about it the other day, they were like, well, you kind of pay attention to the news. You watch what they say on TV or what you hear. And when they all say housing's unaffordability or inaffordable, you just kind of just go along with it. You agree, oh, it's not possible. Well, then, I meet this person, we start having conversations, and I say, look, you've got all this money saved up for a down payment. Let's at least see what you qualify for. Oh, would you look at that? You qualified for $550,000, which was way more than you needed to purchase the duplex you're now house hacking. They had no idea any of that was possible. And this was during December when interest rates were in the 6s. So a lot of it is people coming up with their own mental barriers about whether or not it's affordable. And it's always easy to justify your inaction by looking at a negative, cherry picking the stats or the data, and then saying, oh, it's just impossible. I can't make it happen. That's not actually true. If I was going to give Justin Trudeau, when he watches this, because I'm sure he does, he loves the Real Estate Avengers. Anyways, he's slid in my DMs once or twice. It was either that or a scammy crypto person. But when he watches this, it's like, okay, well, why don't you offer some tax incentives? And I know that a government, especially like Canada's, is like, we ain't cutting taxes. Heck no, we got to get ours. Why don't you offer some tax incentives for starter homes? If you want people to build more affordable, cheaper houses people could get moved into, well then, why don't we just cut taxes severely in that area? But as Matt said, guess what? When you bring those 400 homes in, you do an initial tax cut, but now you have a huge basis of 400 new homes, 400 new houses that are going to pay property taxes. So unfortunately, governments don't and politicians don't seem to have that much forethought. Fellas, I appreciate you being here. Matt can be found at thelumberjacklandlord.com. He's got a course, Lumberjack Landlord, on Instagram and YouTube. Dion can be found at Dion Talk Financial Freedom here on YouTube or on Instagram. Friend him, like him, DM him. He needs to start using it more, and he'll only do it if he gets pressured into it by you guys. Fellas, I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mike.
Ciao.
I'm not
There's
going
your
to say
intro
that
to
in
the
the
video.
video. I'm not going to out Mike in the video.